Up at the very top of my presentation, it says bit.ly/Edulastic_Culver. And then Sherry was kind enough to also add that into the chat space. So you can scoot over and then highlight that and then just drop it into your favorite web browser, and my entire slide deck will be available to you. On the bottom left of the presentation, that is a QR code. If you used your phone and opened up the camera by positioning your camera in the direction of that QR code, it will recognize that it's actually a web link, and it will say, would you like to open this, in whatever your favorite browser is? And the entire presentation would open up on your phone as well. So I am Melissa Culver. I'm going to break away from slide number 1 in about 10 seconds after you have had a chance to get any information from that key slide, and then I'll continue on with the presentation. All right, so I am Melissa Culver. Here is a face to go with my name. You can only see my presentation at this point, hopefully. I don't have a green box around screen number 1, so I'm hoping that my screen is being presented. I turned it off and back on a few times, but I will assume that my presentation is on display for you. I am Melissa Culver. My email is on the screen right there. And then my website is www.melissaculver.com. And then I'm available on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, you can find me at Culver Tech Tools. And it's okay if you're Twitter hesitant at first, and then you just jump on and follow people and you don't say anything. In my opinion, Twitter is a fantastic place in order to find lots of great teaching strategies and resources. It's a great place to ask questions. Just a little background about me. I won't stay on this slide for too long. I am an instructional technology coach here in Clovis Unified. I work in the Clovis North area, and I serve the 5 elementary schools. The next talking points I only share with you in case you're curious and want to reach out and ask questions about other resources and tools. I am Print Lab certified. I work with 3D printers across my campuses. I have 1 3D printer on 1 campus, and then I have 5 that should be arriving within the next couple of weeks. I wrote a grant, and I want to infuse 3D print technology into the K-6 environment, and then programmable robots. So if you're curious about using programmable robots inside your curriculum, or if you're interested in learning about design engineering and you would like a future presentation on those topics, reach out, email me, let me know, and I'll see if I can provide a presentation on those topics. If you would like to connect with me, there are 3 ways in addition to email. I do have a website. I mentioned that website address just a bit ago. YouTube, you can find my YouTube channel by going to my website or going to the presentation link that we provided you. And then I mentioned that I'm available on Twitter as well. At the beginning of the presentation, I did mention to you that this presentation is being recorded. So give Sherry a few days to get those materials together, maybe by Friday. You can access those resources. And then the URL, the shortened URL, is available at the bottom of the screen, bit.ly/ and then CUSD online learning resources. Be very careful. Anything that is a capital letter inside of that web link must also be a capital letter when you're trying to access that resource. And I believe Debbie Parra usually sends out an email with that link on Fridays. Use the drop-down menu over on the right-hand side, choose technology, and then in the technology menu, you should be able to find the information you're looking for in order to access this presentation. And let's head over to that next slide. So this is our outline. I'm the type of person where I'm thankful early on in a presentation when I know exactly where the presenter is going, so I can know what to anticipate next. So these are the 5 talking points. I won't read those out loud to you. I'll let you scan that information. And then I'll scoot on to the why Edulastic. I'll answer that question in the next 3 slides. So in my opinion, it's helpful to have the why behind the what. So the what that we're learning about today is Edulastic. Why would we want to use that? Here are a few talking points that address that answer. This instrument has the capacity to transform assessments in your classroom. not only how they are administered, the time it takes to get that data, but also the feedback that you provide to students. And what you do with that feedback can transform your instructional roadmap. How you facilitate or serve students with an SST, an IEP, or a 504, the construction, the strategy, or the tools that you use in order to form and serve small groups, the information that you provide to parents as they inquire how their students are doing and what strategies the students are finding most difficult. And then as a teacher, we effectively and frequently ask the question, are we ready for that next assessment? And so as we evaluate the answers to those questions, Edulastic becomes a tool that you can use to help you along that process. And then we all grade information to some degree at some level at varying degrees. And when it comes to navigating large amounts of information that we are assessing for students, Edulastic is a fantastic tool that's going to do that self-grading for you. A little bit of effort on the front end, but then Edulastic is going to get that data back to you as quickly as possible, nearly in the snap of a finger, quite frankly. My caution or my word of wisdom to you, as you navigate Edulastic, I'm going to spend the next 52 minutes talking about how fantastic this resource is, but I do want to let you know that it is wise and helpful to vet the material. So Edulastic is a resource that allows school districts, big box companies, and teachers to design content. So you have the freedom to go in and design an assessment, and you can publish it inside that resource for anyone to use. But if you are not carefully examining that, there might be a typo, there could be a spelling error, or maybe you accidentally clicked an answer correct that should be incorrect. And so we're all human, we all make mistakes. And so along that process, just spend a little bit of time vetting some of that material before you send that out, please and thank you. All right, so the easiest process in this whole transaction is actually the teacher setup, because your classes are already pre-rostered in Clever for you. So there is not an 8-step process where you have to answer multiple questions about yourself. Your classes and your students are already to go for you inside Clever. So you as the teacher would go into Clever. Not only would you click on Edulastic, but when it's time for your students to go in, you would ask your students to click on that very same spot as well. So you don't go one direction and then tell your students to go a different direction. You're both headed to the same direction. You're both headed to Clever and you're both headed to Edulastic. If you only have one singular class, then your dashboard experience will look like this. You're only serving one population of students. And if you have more than one class, if you're teaching junior high or high school, and you have multiple sections of this or that or the other thing, then you're going to see each of those individual classes rostered in this space. And inside each of those rectangles, it indicates the number of students inside each of those sections. And there's a little plus symbol that can actually get you started. I don't spend a lot of time talking about the plus symbol in my presentation, but in order to generate a new assignment, you can just click on the plus symbol in order to get started. That's an easy way to get in. So this next area is finding and creating an assessment. We're going to find things that are ready to go, that require zero work on your part. We're going to talk about the idea of sharing that content with others. And we're also going to talk about creating assessments from a pre-done question bank. So thousands of questions ready to go that you can choose from to tailor make a mini, a midpoint, or a summative assessment, depending on the number of questions that you would like and based on the rigor that you would like to choose for that assessment as well. So in the teacher dashboard, I'm now indicating over on the left-hand side, there's like a microscopic little circle. It's very small. And this is actually the button you would use in order to expand the dashboard that's over on the left-hand side. Once you are familiar with what each of those icons mean, then you really don't need to expand it because you're like, oh, I already know what that means. But as you're getting used to the content and what it means and what all those icons represent, then in my opinion, it's good in order to expand that. And so you know what you're clicking on and that you find exactly the right thing. So this is what it looks like when you expand the dashboard so you can see what those icons represent. And I'm going to start in the area right here where it says test. So I'm going to move from test to item bank, which is in this location, but I'm going to start in test. And when you arrive here, it might feel a little bit overwhelming, kind of like riding a bicycle for the first time. You have to pay attention to pedaling and moving forward and looking over your shoulder and all of those sorts of things. And then it becomes second nature. So if it takes you a while to feel comfortable in this space, then that's okay. This message will pop up letting you know that if you have any problems, then clear your filters moving forward. I'm going to try to move in a linear fashion. I'm going to start up here at the top, and then I'm going to move down instead of all over the place. So the very first one is up here on the left. When you're searching for content, maybe you have specific keywords that you're looking for, and that's the fastest, quickest way that you want to use in order to find content. Feel free to use that. If you love that strategy, go ahead and use that. Another strategy that might be helpful for you when you're trying to cull through the material is this organizational section on the left. The organizational section on the left indicates folders that you might want to organize, or searching through the entire library, locating material that you have already authored yourself, locating material that's been shared with you. Maybe you're a co-author on an assessment, or things that are your favorite. So right over here, I'm going to circle the heart. If you come across any content and you're like, oh, that looks fantastic, I want to return to it later, or you already know it's your favorite, you can click on that little heart and it will be stored in your favorites. So you have several ways to organize the material so it's easy for you to navigate. And in that folder area, maybe you might have subfolders. So you know it's going to be Math Unit 1 or Math Unit 2 or Math Unit 3 and so on. Now I'm on that same screen, even though the picture jumped just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to target these filtering ideas over here. So you can search by grade level. You can search by subject. When it says standard set, it indicates the standards that are specific to individual states. So here in California, we're obviously using Common Core. So you would look specifically for Common Core state standards if that's what you're looking for. And then you also have the ability to micro filter by looking for specific individual standards if you would like to as well. So you know that you're specifically going to teach this math standard, for example, then you can easily just choose that one singular math standard. Or maybe you want to bring several different math standards in because you're going to use spiral review as a strategy. And using that as a spiral review, you want to bring in various different standards. And so you can use more than one standard in that search query inside of that box in order to locate assessments that are going to target more than one standard. Now the arrow has shifted, and you'll notice that I have grade 3 mathematics, Common Core math, and you'll notice that there are 2,115 tests that have been populated just on that search query alone. So that gives you an idea that there's a lot of content in here that you can cull through to find as you're looking for specific materials that meet your students right now at this juncture. Along the top, we usually call these breadcrumbs. There's other strategies that we can use as well. And if you want to back away from any one of those specific filters, then you can click the little X up there in order to choose a different search query, one that has fewer guiding principles instead of so many guiding principles. And so this is what it looks like in order to navigate through the content, in order to find things that are ready to go. If you ever need help, the chat box is available to you down in this right-hand corner. this seafoam green color that's very specific to Edulastic. And then you can start a conversation if needed over there in that bottom right corner. You can ask for help anytime that you need to. So I'm going to disengage from the tests that are ready to go. I'm going to scoot over to the item bank. I am going to explain what it looks like to click the button that says assign to students. And I will get to the point where I show you exactly what those questions look like, but those are going to come up in a little while in the presentation. So let me go ahead and head over to this area where it says item bank. So I've used the button over here on the dashboard. I'm coming over here into the item bank area, and the item bank is slightly different from the test area because what we're doing now is we're looking at every individual question so that you can form an assessment of your own. Instead of something that's all ready to go, something that already has 22 questions in it, something that already has 18 questions in it, you want to be the pilot, and now you want to determine exactly the questions that are specific for this Friday, because you know what you taught all week long, for example. So I am still in 3rd grade mathematics. So the search query components look very much the same. So we've seen these items over here. I did not expand what the standards looked like earlier, so I put that little snip in here so that you can see what it looks like if you want 4.md.1 as your standard, for example. So we don't deviate much when it comes to searching for content, but now we're searching for individual questions. And then I will circle up here where it says for 3rd grade, Common Core mathematics, we have 8,923 questions that are pre-done and ready to go that I can choose from. They're free, they don't cost anything. They're right there available to you. And as you search through those questions, over on the right-hand side, you can choose whether or not you want those items to be in the assessment that you've planned for Friday, or the mini assessment that you've planned for Thursday, or the unit assessment that you've planned 2 weeks from now. So you can plan for tomorrow, you can plan for the end of the week, you can plan for the end of the month. You have the flexibility to determine the date at which any of these assessments will go out to the children. On the right-hand side, it gives you the ability to view an individual question. You can see the type of question it is, the type of answer strategy that is used in the question, what it looks like, the vocabulary inside to see if it's perfect for your students. You can heart any one of the questions if you know that you want to come back to specific questions over and over again. And then once you've determined whether or not you want that question to be in your assessment, you have either a plus symbol or an X. When I click on the plus symbol, it turns into an X. So I can engage or disengage that question. I can choose it or I can unchoose it, select or unselect. So I can determine the exact number of exact number of questions, the complexity or the rigor, the standards, etc. Maybe I want 5 questions, maybe I want 12 questions, whatever number you get to choose. And then up at the top of the screen, we have 2 different options, either new test or new item. Maybe you search through the questions and you didn't find a question that specifically met exactly what you were hoping for. Well, you can design a new question. Or the other option is you have found 12 questions that fit the standards that you just taught. You're ready for that assessment. And now you want to design that new test using the questions you have selected. So those are the pathways you can choose right here. And once you have made that selection, then you can move on to either creating that new item or forming that new test. I'm not going to spend time on this item right here. I'm just going to mention that it exists. If you choose that you want to make a new question, you have lots of things to choose from. You have all the tools and accessories that are available to you in Edulastic to make a highly complex question with multiple answer option choices for the students. I'm only going to mention that it's available. I'm not going to train or teach you how to do that because I don't have time in my presentation to explain that. So you're more than welcome to play with that and explore and see if it's perfect for you. But I'm going to move on to the next screen. I'm mentioning this, but I'm not going to train you how to do it. Another option inside Edulastic is that if you already have a PDF, maybe there's a district-wide assessment, or which we usually do in Illuminate, but maybe there's an assessment of some kind that's available in PDF, and you are thinking to yourself, man, wouldn't it be great if I could do this digitally so the students at home can take this assessment, or it could be graded for me? You have the ability to upload that PDF, and then on the PDF, as the students are viewing it, you are placing either the ABCD option or the fill in the blank option, and then the children can finish that sentence or put the correct punctuation in, or then they can choose the multiple choice for that. So that is an option for you, but based on time, I won't be able to explain exactly how that process works. So where we were, where that new text option was available, you would be able to find that option so that you could upload your PDF and then make an assessment based on that PDF. So here I am back in the area where I'm looking at ready to go assessments. So I was in the dashboard. I clicked on tests in order to see things that are ready to go. In order to assign something that's ready to go, I'm going to hover my mouse on top of that specific assessment. And I'm given these 3 different options to choose from when my mouse hovers in that area. Preview is kind of self-explanatory. It's the opportunity for you to look at the assessment as though you're actually the student. So what does every question look like? What type of answer options are available? Do I like the wording? Did I find any errors? Those sorts of things. And I'm going to show you what those questions look like a little bit farther on in my presentation. So I'll answer those questions for you. And then the other 2 options are assign and more. I'm going to start with more. So let's pretend that I just clicked where it said more. And this is what you would see on the screen if you clicked the word more. You will see some of the buttons that we just saw, assign and preview. You will also have access to the details area that gives you some more information about that specific assessment. And you also have the option of clone. Now, cloning is kind of like the original, but not exactly the original. And that's exactly what we're saying in this situation. If I wanted to make a clone of this specific assessment, what I'm doing is I'm taking a copy of it, but I'm going to modify it just a pinch. For example, if this assessment has 42 questions in it, and I say to myself, oh, that's way too many questions, but I really like questions 1, 2, 7, 6, 14, 22, and 31. You can go through and choose your favorites and then just make an assessment based on your favorites that were inside the original. So you're essentially making a copy of it, but you're modifying it. So if you find anything in that test area that's ready to go and you want to make any modifications or adjustments to it, most of them are usually modifiable. On rare occasions, I have found somewhere it's like, no, just kidding, you can't clone this one. But sometimes I have found that maybe there are 10 of the 12 questions that I like, but my students really aren't ready for questions 11 and 12 yet. So then I can just erase those 2 questions and then make a copy of my very own. All right, so that's what it means to clone. If I had chosen the assign button a couple screens ago where I had those 3 options, if I had clicked where it said assign, this is what I would see next. And this gives you the ability to determine the class with which you want that to be assigned to. So if you want it to be period 1, period 2, etc. If you want it to open on a specific date, if you want it to close on a specific date, and if you want to choose specific students. So for differentiated instruction, if you have 2 students that aren't supposed to receive this assessment, or maybe there's only 2 students who are supposed to receive this assessment. Maybe you have a small pocket of students who are in a small reteaching group, and they're the only ones in the entire class that need to retest on these specific standards. You can tailor make assessments for students that you would like to have the assessment, or you can remove those students from the assignment when it comes time to assigning it. You can also determine whether or not you want those responses to go live to the students at the close of the assessment. So if you do not want the children to receive the score immediately when they're finished, or if you want those scores to only be live 5 days later after you've had a chance to go in and manually score question 7 for the whole class, you're the one who gets to determine when those scores get released. So you can make some of those specific fine-tuning pieces before you officially assign it to the students. And then over on the right-hand side, you would officially click the assign button, and then the children would have access to it on the date that you determined. All right, let me go ahead and click on that next slide. So the natural question then is, what does it look like for the students? How do they get in? How do I, as the teacher, explain to them what this process looks like? So let's go ahead and navigate that. So you're in class, you're introducing the students that you're going to use this for the very first time. There is some natural scaffolding that you want to provide to them to counsel them into this experience so they are successful. And I'm hoping that 10 seconds later, the video shows up. There really is a video on this screen. Definitely in the Google version, there is one. It wasn't my plan to show the video anyway. So if the video never shows up, then that's okay. But, oh, there we go. There it appeared. I don't know why I had to click it. Anyway, this video is designed specifically for your students in mind. It's about 11 minutes long, and it walks the students through step by step exactly what's expected of them when they head into Edulastic. So I'll let you watch this on your own time. I just want to be respectful of the amount of time that we have. I still have several slides left in my presentation. And in my own teaching environment, there are 2 things that I would do. I would show this whole class to the students that are in class. And the second thing that I would do, I would also post this video inside Google Classroom for anyone who's absent and for anyone who needs to watch that video again. And for you, the educator, in my opinion, this would be a good video for you to watch. That way you just have that experiential knowledge of, oh, okay, so if somebody asks a question, this is what I would use in order to answer that question for them. So there's your teaching video that you can share with the students so they know what to do. Now, I'm also going to show you questions that would appear in front of students so that you understand that process as well. You don't have the video version, you get the thumbnail version, and you get me live instead. So when a student goes in, we already mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that they're going to go to Clever, and I already mentioned that they're going to click on Edulastic. And then once they click on Edulastic, they would see whatever assessment is waiting for them on the screen. And then depending on the number of teachers they have, they could have multiple assessments waiting for them. On the right-hand side, there's usually a start assignment button, letting them know that they haven't started this one. If they've started it and they paused it and they're coming back to it, it would say resume assessment. And if they're finished with it, then it would say review because they have an opportunity to review their scores. So let me click in here. I'm not going to read those out loud to you, but in the next 9 or so slides, I'm walking through the process of explaining to you the different types of questions the children will have access to. And these are the different types of questions the students will have access to. Varying degrees of rigor and complexity are available to them. In my opinion, one fantastic element about Edulastic is that it has so many parallels to the end of year assessment that the children just become familiar with the functionality of how this works. It decreases their anxiety, increases their familiarity, and now you're not training them how to use the software because Edulastic is very much like the end of year state assessment software. Not exactly, but it has many parallels. So this is what a question would look like for a student. I'm going to talk about the dashboard up at the top. The very first piece that I'll mention is the drop-down menu right here. This is very parallel to the SBAC assessment. In the SBAC assessment, you have that drop-down menu that allows the students to see what question they're on, and it lets them know how many questions in total there are for that assessment. You also have a back button. You have a next button. You have access to the bookmark or the flag button. If a child comes to a question and they're like, you know what, I'm just not ready to answer that question yet, I need to think about it a little bit more, they can flag any of the questions that they're uncertain about and then return to them later at the end of the assessment. The X, I'm going to mention that a little bit later in my presentation. It'll make more sense when I get to that next slide. The two buttons that are located over here on the right, the one that looks like someone who is walking allows the students to see accessibility features. And then the one on the very end that says exit is somewhat self-explanatory. If the child or the student needs to leave the assessment, then they would choose the exit button in that situation. So here we are showing or modeling another type of question. So this is a bar graph. So you notice that there are picture-oriented elements that can be instituted inside of the assessment. And then the small rectangle on the bottom indicates that it's not a multiple choice question, but the child actually needs to use the keyboard in order to choose the numeric response for this question. Here we are with different types of graphics that are available. So we have colored representative items. The circle over here indicates that only one answer is going to be correct in this situation. I'm pointing to the bookmark in this one in case I forgot to mention it on the last slide. And this is where I mentioned the X, but I said I wasn't going to mention it until I got to this other slide. So this specific slide is showing you that you can mark off any responses that you think are incorrect. So as the child is navigating a multiple choice question and they clearly know that B and D are wrong right off the bat, then it removes visually these two options. So now the child's navigating in his or her mind. All right, I'm only left with A and C. So now I need to navigate through and utilize those math-oriented thinking processes to determine which answer is correct. So you can use that to cross off any answers that you think are incorrect. Here I am, I already pointed it out. One singular answer is a circle. I mentioned briefly earlier the idea of the rectangle for a math-oriented numeric response, but that previous screen did not show you the features that are available by clicking on that specific box. So if you're working with a mixed number, if you're working with a fraction, if you have other mathematic characteristics that need to be applied to that answer space, this is very SBAC oriented as well. When the children click in that space, they also see a keypad that looks like this as well. In my opinion, it is helpful for the children to practice these resources in an environment that doesn't have as much anxiety. If they have the ability to go in and test these things out and they're told there's no grade associated with this, I need you to practice it, it gives them an opportunity to fail forward with grace with no penalty. So I usually step in with the very first assessment and say, team, this very first assessment's not going in the grade book, but I do want you to do your best. And it just gives them an opportunity to explore, investigate, evaluate, dialogue. Like, oh, it's really a monologue, but you're asking yourself questions. What happens when I click here? What happens when I do this? Is this the right answer? Is that how it works? And you're asking yourself questions and you're answering them through investigative discovery. And so I want students to have that ability to explore that environment. Not all questions offer you the ability to use the scratch pad, and my arrow is specifically pointing to the scratch pad for this question. If students are offered the scratch pad, they can use the trackpad, the mouse, or the touch screen in order to construct their thinking on the screen to achieve an answer that they think is correct. And so there are tools over here. And this is what that scratch pad looks like. You have that toolbar that appears. And in my teaching video that I mentioned a few slides ago, I instruct the students to come up here and to click right here on the pencil tool, and then to write their thoughts out on the screen. On the far right-hand side, my picture does not show it, but there's an undo and a redo button. So if they make any errors and they need to remove things, they can use that undo button if needed. Another thing that's important, and I explained this in the video, you cannot come in and choose whatever answer you think is correct until you turn the scratch pad off. It's one mild hiccup that can cause students a little bit of frustration until they figure it out. But if you mention it when the video is finished, it's another layer of assistance that would help the children along. Let me say this one more time. This sketch pad or scratch paper or whatever you want to call it still exists on top of the area where the child needs to choose their response. So the student must come up to the scratch pad and turn the scratch pad off in order to select their answer in order to move on. All right. Tables are another option. So if you have multiple boxes, yes, true, false, yes, no, those sorts of things, divisible by 2, not divisible by 2, etc. This is a great place to practice. Paper assessments. I suppose you could use paper assessment for this, but it's really nice when the software is going to grade that for you. You also have literature. You've got writing, grammar, all of those other characteristics that are in here as well. You've got the 2-screen experience that's very much like the SBAC. You've got the passage you're supposed to read on the left-hand side, as well as the questions on the right-hand side. You'll notice that there are boxes. So the child may be asked to respond using 2 answers to a question like that. Usually the circles and the boxes differentiate between singular or multiple responses. There is also the option of responding in a text fashion. Not only do some of the math questions offer this, but then also our ELA questions offer this as well. And in a situation like this, Edulastic doesn't have the capacity to grade that for you. You, the teacher, need to go back in and manually grade that aspect of the assessment. In my opinion, this is excellent practice, especially for our 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students who are still becoming more familiar with this concept of utilizing that split screen experience. I don't remember if the highlighting tool is an option. I forgot to explore that. So forgive me for not paying attention to that. I can't remember if Edulastic offers highlighting or not. Once the child has reached the very end of the assessment, you'll notice that it's question number 15 of 15. The submit button is located right here. And then the child needs to review. There's a review screen. I have it in my video, but I don't have it here on this screen right here. The computer system will actually ask the child to evaluate whether or not all of their responses have been completed. So anything that was skipped or flagged, there's kind of like this gentle warning screen that says, hey, pay attention to questions 2, 3, 7, because you flagged or skipped those. Go back and double check them, please. So if you receive any assessments that are coming to you where answers were skipped, then it means that the child did not pay attention to that final screen before clicking the submit button again. The software does ask them to verify that all questions have been completed. All right, moving on to the next screen, we introduce the idea of immediate student feedback. And then it's up to you if you want that immediate feedback coming to them or if you want that feedback to be delayed. So when the child is completed with the assessment, data similar to this would arrive on the screen, letting the student know exactly how they performed on each question. And the key along the bottom helps you. Green means correct, red is incorrect, orange means partially correct. Maybe there were 2 correct answers, but the child only responded correctly to one of those. The charcoal color indicates that it was skipped, and then blue indicates that the teacher needs to go back and manually grade question number 10. And so that's what it looks like for the child. I don't see any questions in the chat, so I'll assume that my speed, my pacing, and the information are fine. In a situation where you have a child that rushes, races, is quite distracted, this information is very helpful in the context of an SST, an IEP, or a parent-teacher conference, or even a teacher-student conference where you're guiding that child to success. You'll notice that the child skipped questions 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then this turquoise or seafoam green line is showing you the number of minutes that were spent on each question. So it's going to be quite perplexing if a 22 question assessment was finished in 1 minute and 22 seconds and the score was 100%. So this data is very helpful not only to you as the teacher, but also to the child as well. And if you ever need to have a conference with either the parent or the student, you have this hard data to use in order to conference about testing strategies that the child might be applying. So this is also what it looks like for the child. When the child goes in, they have an opportunity to see that something has been finished. So this assessment was finished with a 100% score. And I'll talk about it a little bit later, but as the teacher, you have the ability to determine whether or not students can go in for a second attempt. So if you feel that a really hard concept is coming and some of them might fail that concept the first time, you can hand select which students can have a second opportunity, or if the whole class can have a second opportunity to do that. And then you have different types of data available here to the students: when it's due, when they completed it, or whether or not they need to retake it. So this child got 100%, this child doesn't need to retake it. And then the students also have a dashboard over on that left-hand side. The information that they're choosing from would be different. You would need to caution the children to use that little teeny circle up on the top in order to expand the menu on the left-hand side. And then the 3 categories that they have to choose from are assignments, grades, and my classes. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time here in the student area so that you can see what it looks like for them. And then I'm kind of short on time. I still have several slides to go through. And I want to make sure that I show you what the teacher dashboard looks like when it comes to data coming back to you. And if I go a little bit over, I'm so sorry. So we have one student in here who's completed several different assessments. The scores are available over here, exactly what the name of the assessment is located over here, etc. And then if the child ever wants to review what their score was based on question 1, 2, 3, 7, 12, etc., then they can click on the review button to get all of that data. And if parents are leaning into you saying, why does my child have a C? Well, then you can let them know inside the Clever dashboard that their child can open up this dashboard and open up any of those assessments, and then the parent can clearly see how any of those assessments were going. So that information is available for parents as well. If a child has difficulties locating specific assessments based on a specific teacher, there is a drop-down menu on that top right corner in order to choose a specific teacher to locate assessments by teacher instead of having all of them sort of accumulate in one space together. So what does that data look like? How can I understand how my students are doing? Let me show you what that live teacher dashboard looks like. If you start the assessment for your entire class at 9 o'clock on the button, you can literally watch this data accumulate. It will refresh about every 15 seconds. You're going to find out exactly how students are doing question by question. It's live, it's accessible right when that test is going. Lots of information here. I know it's a little bit overwhelming. I'm going to try to break it down into parts so that it's a little bit digestible. I'm going to start by talking about the 3 items that are located up here. You start in the live dashboard whenever you arrive. If you ever need the standards-based report, you can click on that tab. And then over on the right where it says settings, this would let you make adjustments while the assessment is in progress. So if you want to change that due date, if you want to make modifications to who should or shouldn't have it, then you can head over into that space in order to make modifications to an in-progress assessment. Over on the right-hand side, oh, I clustered all that information into that one slide, but I broke it into 3 slides, sorry. Over on that right-hand side, you have 3 different view options to choose from. You have the card view, the student view, or the questions view. We're currently in the card view, where you basically have a helicopter analysis of everything that's going on. If you wanted to break it down by individual student, you could click where it says students. And then if you want to break it down by questions over on the right-hand side, maybe you know there are 2 standards that you need to circle back and you need to touch on, and you just want to quickly find, okay, what are those 2 standards? All right, question 7 and question 13. Those are the key teaching points that I need to address next week. Then you can just hop over there to those questions to figure out what information needs to be readdressed. Right here, it says question 1, question 2, and question 3. Green indicates the number of students who got it correct. The yellow indicates the students who got it partially correct. Red indicates the students who answered that specific question incorrectly. And we talked about it earlier when we looked at that one singular student, but this curving line here indicates the class average, the amount of time the children are spending when it comes to analyzing that specific question. So you'll notice, in my opinion, question 4 might be a little bit difficult because they're spending more time on that specific question than they are on any other questions. The overall class average is located over here. We've got an 82% class average on that one singular assessment. My arrow is now pointing down here into this rectangular area. Each of these rectangles represents one singular student. I've blocked out name for security purposes, but each of these individual rectangles indicates a student, and the name would normally show up there, but I had to erase it for security purposes. And so if you were the teacher scanning this, you'd be able to see, okay, this belongs to Beth, this belongs to Tabitha, and so on. You'd be able to identify that information. You also have the ability to use these three options right here. If you wanted to print this one and this one and this one, you would select those individual boxes and then choose the print option in order to print those out. For whatever reason you wanted to share it with parents, etc., you have access to that. The very next item adjacent to the print button is the redirect. And the redirect is what allows you to provide students with a second testing option for this assessment if that is needed. And I'm not going to explain how to do that, but I've tucked this cute little video in there that explains the process of how that works. So I'll let you watch that on your own. In the chat space, we have access to the link, so you can go and use that information. If you need to download the grades or the responses, you would use the More button on the right-hand side in order to download that information. When you click on an individual student, it's going to take you to the report for that specific student. So we saw that a little bit earlier when the students had access to their information, but you, the teacher, have access to that individual information as well. And then I'm going to scoot over to the right-hand side. And when I scoot over to the right-hand side, I'm pointing out that you can jump from student A to student B to student C using this drop-down menu over here. And then right over here, you can give overall feedback if needed. And then earlier in my presentation, I talked about how some questions need to be manually graded. As you scoot down the screen just a little bit, it's the next screen. If you need to sync grades with Google Classroom, I have no idea how to do that. I'll just be honest with you. But if you email me and we need to troubleshoot it later, I can try to help you with that. All of our classes are synced with Clever. So I'm not sure how friendly it is to actually sync that information with Google Classroom. So I'm so sorry, I don't know if that'll work, but we can always email later if needed. So this is the area where you would go in and you would provide specific guiding feedback. You can overwrite a score if you ever feel like you need to, like, oh, the child should have received 2 instead of 1 or whatever. And then if you ever need to provide specific feedback in here, guiding principles, pay more attention, etc., then you have the ability to include that information in there. So individual student data is helpful for clear and specific feedback on test taking strategies, guiding language when a parent-teacher conference is needed, help that will shape the student in any principle that you're teaching, or if you're concerned or uncertain as to whether or not cheating is happening, you can use some of that metadata to evaluate whether or not that is occurring. Why is this tool grand? I'll pause 10 seconds. I'll let you read that on your own. I have another slide that you can read on your own. Sometimes it's unpleasant when people just read it out loud to people. So here's that next slide. I'll let you read on your own. Oh, I didn't mean to click away. I'm so sorry. No photocopies, no lost papers. I don't know about you, but those are pretty fantastic in my opinion. And then why is it grand? Because it does the grading for you. Not only just the grading for you, but it gives students access to clear and specific feedback in a timely fashion. And research shows that it's the #1 determiner that determines exponential growth in the classroom. Clear and specific guiding feedback. Because if a child is responding to a question incorrectly for 3 weeks, that's 3 weeks of lost learning. And they're embedding those improper practices into their mind. But the minute we have an opportunity to provide them with guiding feedback on specific information, it points them in an alternative direction and it provides them with an opportunity to improve. I only have a few more slides left, and then I want to provide a few minutes at the end for questions. There is the ability to add a co-teacher or a student teacher. If for some reason this doesn't work, reach out and email me. I've never tried it. I just know the button's in there. So forgive me if it doesn't work. I just know the button is in there. So the add co-teacher option is available in there. If you need to add a co-teacher, just email me. We'll try to figure out if it works or not. And then another great thing is that you've got PLC aligned assessments. If you design an assessment and you share it with your other colleagues or your grade level people, you now have a digital assessment that's graded for you to determine what practices are best for your environment. When you collaborate together as a team and you say, wow, those test scores are great, what practices did you use? This is an aligned assessment that you can use. In order to do that, it may need to be an assessment that one of you has designed, but quite frankly, it doesn't need to, because if you find one that's already there, you can just share the name of that assessment with your colleagues and say, hey, we're going to choose this one over here. This is the name of it. Can you find it? And then if anyone designs one, that's usually when the link is available. You can email that out to your colleagues. And by emailing that out to your colleagues, then each of you can work on an assessment that one person designed. So not as much work, but everybody benefits from it. And here we are at that very last slide, which gives me 6 minutes for questions. So if you have not grabbed that URL, that bit.ly, that link, please go ahead and do that. My name again is Melissa Culver. My email is melissaculver@cusd.com. My website is melissaculver.com as well. And it was my joy to serve you today. Thank you so much for gifting me with this opportunity to provide this information to you.